Good day to you, ladies and gentlemen. It's my hope on this occasion to chat with you chiefly about the value of drawing philosophical thoughts from autobiographical talking, and as well to chat with you about moving. First, I want to share with you this interesting little tidbit I read from Charles Sanders Peirce, pragmatist, or pragmatist, hard to pronounce, but he wanted to differentiate himself from the pragmatists just a bit. Reading here a tidbit from his Collected Papers, Volume 1, Principles of Philosophy, Lessons from the History of Science. Section 23, Economy of Research. The gist of it is this. I will give you two very brief citations and then briefly remark on what I gain from that. Having a certain fund of energy, time, money, etc., all of which are merchantable articles to spend upon research, the question is how much is to be allowed to each investigation. If we have a number of studies in which we are interested, we should commence with the most remunerative. Are you as bad at pronouncing certain words as I am? Remunerative. Then, blah, blah, blah. Let's do that again. If we have a number of studies in which we are interested, we should commence with the most remunerative and carry that forward until it becomes no more than equally remunerative with the commencement of another. Anyway, the bottom line then here is, right, it goes to this concept that he has of the economy of research, or to put it another way, time is value. And not just financial value. It's not just a matter of what money am I going to make with my time, but what more intrinsic value or spiritual value or value of consciousness am I getting? What moral value am I getting from how I'm spending my time? And it's with that thought in mind that I am contemplating, of course, how I want to spend my time. What do I want to concentrate on contemplating? Why this as opposed to that? It's a difficult question. And the question, therefore, we have to ask certain practical questions, such as what is to gain from contemplating this as opposed to contemplating that? Knowing, of course, that it's not a foolproof Q&A to experience there. However, we can have guesses, can't we? Anyway, one thought I have on this at present is to try and draw as much as I can from autobiography, or that is to literally take from my life things that appear to be the philosophical aspects to me. And there are actually a number of reasons for doing this. I've brought to your attention time and time again, and I know it won't be the last time, but one of my favorite philosophers and greatest influences, Michel de Montaigne. What I like is that there is a degree of autobiography in the way he writes. In fact, I wish there was more. There's just much more I'd like to know about him. I thought he could even be more personal. However, context of the times, and one can only do so much, etc., etc., etc. However, drawing from him, I do realize I want to find the philosophical aspects of my life story, both through flashbacks, goals that I have, hopes for the future, as well as sup at the moment, so to speak. And it's with that thought that I'm going to chat with you about moving. And not just moving in general, but, well, so it is the fact that my wife Ashley and I, we are finally leaving East Windsor, New Jersey. And I just don't know how to begin expressing how deeply I've wanted this for so long. And there's quite a bit of context that's necessary for you to understand how this happens to be the case. You see, it had never been my intention to spend any time in East Windsor. It all has to go back to my youth here. And so this is what I mean, right, by going autobiographical. You could call this a sort of further idea on aesthetics and that of, and I guess I'll jot this down, but also, therefore, personal meaning. Because I think that it's hard to glean the philosophical without understanding the personal meaning of something. And I would argue that it's hard to really understand the personal meaning of something without really understanding the context in which you're relating to this topic or that topic. So, back to it then with moving. So, for those of you who don't know, I was born and raised in New Jersey. I was born and raised in Robbinsville, New Jersey. Robbinsville is in Mercer County. It has gone also by the name Washington Township, though there are numerous Washington Townships in the state of New Jersey. And I don't know the background behind why it's been referred to both Washington Township and Robbinsville, though now it just goes by the name, I believe, Robbinsville. I was born in 1986 in Trenton, St. Francis Hospital, though we didn't live in the city of Trenton. We lived in Cream Ridge, which is south of Robbinsville in Monmouth County. So that would be sort of the beginning of South Jersey, for those of you who don't live in New Jersey or those of you who aren't familiar with the geography. Anyway, as the story goes, my mother and father split up when I was 3, and my mother took my little brother and I with her when she left my father and transplanted us to Robbinsville. So I went to elementary school and middle school in Robbinsville. To describe Robbinsville for you and what it means to me. So Robbinsville, when I grew up in Robbinsville, was actually, I was born in 1986, so it was in Robbinsville by around 1989 or 1990. And at that time, Robbinsville still was quite rural. It was also quite white. I can recall having, up until about 7th grade, to the best of my recollection, I can recall everyone being white, except for one individual who was an African American. And so I was not, in that context, exposed to a diversity of people. I didn't grow up in a community that was widely diverse. It was exceedingly white and exceedingly rural at that time. There wasn't much development. In terms of further socioeconomic background in Robbinsville, I'm just too young to remember much, though I could tell you that the part of town we lived in was apartments, townhouses, and condos, though there was also a lot of houses with an acre or two of property, rural farmland type properties, and then there were your sort of cliche suburban streets with houses, middle class, very middle class houses, and not even upper middle class houses, just sort of pure working class. Working class is the right word, but just very pure middle class. That's how I remember it anyway. Did I like it? At that point in time, I hadn't yet cultivated any sense of preference or distaste for geography. Though I was sure that it wasn't the only kind of place there was, because while I spent most of my time in Robbinsville, I had my father who lived in Cream Ridge, about 15 minutes or so south of Robbinsville, a much more rural area. Just to give you a sense of it, my father's property was 2 acres of land, house on a hill, a backyard that goes up like another hill, and then forest and golf course behind. And there was an in-ground swimming pool outside in the far, I want to say east of my father's property. And in front of the house, down the hill, across the street, horses. And just this open space, a lot of land, green grass. And to the east, I want to say, I've got my east and west confused, but on one side of my father's property, you have more houses, 1 or 2 acres of land, and the same thing on the other side. And a lot of them on hills. And so this is an area that is very open space and very not populated. It's not the kind of place where you get much sense of your neighbors. And as a kid, when I spent my time at my father's house in Cream Ridge, much of my time was spent wandering around outside. Eyes glazed at the sky or some animal. We had outdoor cats, the beautiful trees. We had unfertilized apple trees, for example. So real one with nature kind of experience. During the winters, we got to go sledding down the hill in toboggans. It was a wonderful thing. Not the experience in Robbinsville. In Robbinsville, there was no enticement to being outside. It just wasn't as captivating. It wasn't all this space and sense of openness and nature. Just houses pretty close together, and streets and more houses and cars and all that. And so I would argue that I begin to develop a preference probably for a more rural area when I was younger, just based on the fact that, for whatever reason, I enjoyed the open space. I've always had a thing for open space, as long as I can remember. Now, the other sort of geographical preference I've had is the sea, the ocean. And for a long, long, long time, it was in fact my dream to own a beach house and live on the beach. It was only in the midst of growing fears of hurricanes and elevation of sea level and things of that nature, concern with flooding and the insurance costs and all of that. As my thoughts have been developing on that, though, I've sort of lost the decades-long attraction I've had to the beach. In fact, the earliest memory of life that I have is of the beach. I don't know how old I am. No, I have 2 memories that sort of compete for oldest memory. I don't know which is older. I don't know which goes first. I don't know if it was on the same day. I just don't know. but there are two. I just heard the sound and I was like, what's that? I hope that the microphone isn't, I hope that that's not ruining the quality of this, because that would make me very mad. So the first memory I have then is of my mother holding one hand and my father holding the other hand, and we are in the ocean. And to me, it seems like we're really far out. Common sense tells me most likely the tide was simply out, but it felt like we were in the depths of the horizon of the sea somehow. And I just remember the only comparison I can offer you is the feeling I have when I look at my wife's face of just pure love and fascination and awe. That's what I remember feeling. And I remember feeling a sense of love and comfort, and it was just my first sense of happiness and my first memory. Very close to this memory, and again, I don't know if it was before, I don't know if it was after, I don't know the context of it, is driving to the beach, or maybe it's a lake, but I think it's the beach. And I remember just seeing water on both sides out the window of the car, and I remember saying, water, water. And I always had this myth in my mind that that was my first word, though I've never actually asked my mother if that was my first word or what my first word may have been. Good conversation starter, though, isn't it, actually? I'm just thinking about how it's interesting how when you really slow things down and delve into things, it's interesting how they can quite carry on, can't they? So I've got a deeply embedded love of the sea, love of open space and sort of rural area. I'm growing up, though, mostly in Robbinsville, and though not really having feelings of it one way or the other, though the more I grow exposed to the beach, as a kid taking trips to Cape Cod, would fall deeper in love with the beach. When I was in 5th grade, my father and stepmother took us to Cancun, and that's when I was exposed to the first time to the Caribbean Sea and the beautiful color that was the Caribbean Sea, and grew really quite this was the beginning of an actual obsession with the Caribbean Sea. I've been waiting to tell this story really for so long, I realize. I spent a year, I think it was last year, I think it was the year before, really jotting my thoughts on all of this down in a collection of personal essays that I just never ultimately finished or did anything with. Anyway, there's actually more to this story, but I don't want this video to have been in vain. My more particular point here, then, is that I've thought a lot about environmental surrounding, and I've thought a lot about geography, and I've thought a lot about where I want to live. And I could tell you it's not East Windsor. And that's a long story in itself, but just to give you my initial criticisms of this place, which I will pick up on a little bit more in this next video after this, but just to sort of set it up for you. There are good things about East Windsor. It is remarkably safe. On average, I don't believe the town receives more than 1 homicide, if that, a year. Usually 1 to 0 homicides a year. So it's wonderfully safe, which is something I value. However, what I don't like is a lot of houses are very crammed together. For whatever reason, a lot of people don't take care of their properties in East Windsor. By that I mean you see a lot of lawns that are never cut. You see a lot of abandoned buildings. You just see a lot of, I don't know, it's not aesthetically pleasing. A lot of street signs are faded. A lot of sidewalks are busted. There's always a dire need for road work. I know that this is true of a lot of places that really suffer in the winter because of the salt. That may not be the most exceptional, but particularly the sidewalks and the street signs, they suffer from just utter neglect in this township. And it's interesting that just like the aesthetics of the town, in my view, tends to suffer from neglect, so does the politics. And I'm not just talking about the town council that really doesn't take care of the aesthetics of the town, street signs and things like that, but the community doesn't take care to have a good town council. In my years of experience going to town council meetings in East Windsor, people don't go. I was very often, even when I was running for town council with other people, I was often the only one to attend town council meetings. No disrespect to the fellows I ran with, but it often annoyed me utterly that they were running on the same ticket as I was for town council, yet I was the only one consistently attending the meeting. So I felt as if they frankly didn't deserve to advance politically in that town quite the same way I did, to be honest about it. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at that for now and chat with you more about moving and geography and other things as is appropriate in the next video. Thank you so much for your time, and I will chat with you again soon. Bye.